Have you ever wondered why some relationships, despite their promise, leave you feeling drained and confused? There is a moment, subtle and almost imperceptible, when the warmth of connection shifts into the chill of control. A conversation becomes a labyrinth. A glance becomes a verdict. And without realizing it, you begin to question your own reflection, as though your very sense of self has been quietly rewritten by another's hand. This is not love. It is the silent architecture of manipulation, a structure built not on intimacy but on power. At its heart lies a truth many women feel in their bones but cannot yet name. When you begin to draw a boundary, the mask of affection often slips, revealing the hunger beneath. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the repressed, unconscious aspects of the psyche that seek expression in the world around us. In manipulative dynamics, the shadow often wears a charming face. It presents as the caring partner, the devoted friend, the attentive lover. Yet beneath it carries an unspoken contract. I will love you as long as you abandon yourself for me. This is the unholy bargain of control. For the woman who senses this but cannot yet define it, the sovereign queen archetype stirs within her, whispering through the cracks of confusion. She is the part of you that remembers sovereignty, even when the ground beneath feels stolen. She does not scream or plead, she simply knows. Her power is not in force but in discernment, the quiet ability to see what lies beneath the surface and to name it without fear. Emotional manipulation thrives in fog. Gaslighting is its most insidious weapon, where reality itself becomes a shifting mirage. You say, "That hurt me," and the answer comes back, "You're too sensitive." You remember an event clearly, but you are told that never happened. Over time, the ground you stand on dissolves until you are left clinging not to truth, but to the approval of the one who distorts it. Jung would say that the manipulator projects their shadow onto you. Their fear of losing control, their unacknowledged wounds, their terror of abandonment. They cannot face these within themselves, so they cast them outward, making you carry their darkness as if it were your own. And if you accept that burden, if you mistake their fear for your failure, the cycle is sealed. But here is where the alchemy begins. The moment you see the pattern, even dimly, the spell begins to crack. The queen within you rises not with anger but with clarity. She asks, "What is mine and what is not?" This question is the sword that cuts through the web of deceit. It is simple, but it requires courage, because the moment you claim your boundaries, you will meet resistance. Why do manipulators fear boundaries so deeply? Because boundaries expose the illusion of control. They reveal the truth that love cannot be coerced, that connection cannot be owned. A boundary says, "I see myself clearly, and I will not abandon her to keep you comfortable." To someone whose identity depends on dominance, this is terrifying. Your no is not just a refusal, it is a mirror, forcing them to face the emptiness they have hidden beneath their mask. And so the dance intensifies. The manipulator may become tender, apologetic, showering you with affection to draw you back into compliance. Or they may grow cold, punishing you with silence or anger. Both are the same tactic wearing different clothes, an attempt to pull you back into their orbit. This is where many falter because the longing for peace, for love, for safety is strong. You want to believe their words. You want the warmth back. But the queen within whispers, what you are missing is not love. It is yourself. Discernment is your shield here. To see not only the behavior but the pattern beneath the behavior. To recognize when affection is a lure and when silence is a chain. This is where emotional intelligence becomes more than theory. It becomes survival. The ability to hold your center when the world around you tilts. To breathe when every instinct screams to appease. To remember that true love does not demand you erase yourself to keep it alive. Stoic philosophy offers a profound ally in this moment. Epictetus taught that the only true power we possess is over our own mind and choices. Everything else is outside our control. When you stand in that truth, the manipulator's game begins to unravel. Their words may sting, their tactics may sway, but they cannot touch the core of you that has chosen to see clearly. That inner calm is not passive. It is defiance in its purest form. You may wonder, how do I know if I am in such a dynamic? The answer is in your body. Do you feel a constant undercurrent of anxiety, as if you are walking on eggshells? Do you find yourself apologizing for things you don't even understand just to restore peace? Have you begun to distrust your own perceptions? These are the whispers of your psyche, telling you that the balance is broken. And yet, here lies the paradox. The manipulator is not always a monster. Often they are a wounded soul, enacting patterns learned long before you met them. But compassion does not require self-sacrifice. You can see their pain and still refuse to carry it. You can love them and still choose yourself. This is not cruelty. It is the highest form of truth. The path ahead is not about fighting them. It is about reclaiming you, about listening to the sovereign queen within, who does not beg for validation but simply stands in her worth. Every boundary you set is not just a line in the sand. It is a declaration. I am no longer willing to abandon myself for love. And so the question lingers in the air, heavy and sharp. If you stopped seeking their approval for just one moment, if you turned inward and asked what you truly need, what would your answer be? There is a silence that follows the first true boundary. It is not the absence of sound, but the shifting of energy, as if the room itself inhales and waits. In that space, the manipulative dynamic reveals its truest face. For some, it erupts in rage, a desperate attempt to reassert control. For others, it collapses into guilt-laden pleas, designed to tether you back with the weight of obligation. Both are born of the same root, fear. The fear of losing the narrative. The fear of no longer being able to define your reality for you. Carl Jung spoke often of individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating the self beyond the masks we wear for the world. In relationships poisoned by manipulation, individuation is not just a path of growth, it is an act of survival, because every manipulative dynamic demands a sacrifice of self. It asks you to cut away your intuition, to silence your truth, to fragment your identity until only the version they can control remains. To refuse that bargain is to reclaim the pieces they tried to scatter. The sovereign queen archetype becomes crucial here. She does not scream to prove her power. She does not claw to defend her worth. Her strength is quieter, deeper, a steady flame that does not flicker no matter how the wind howls. When you draw a boundary from this place, not out of anger but out of self-recognition, it carries an authority that cannot be faked. It says, without words, I have returned to myself, and you can no longer define me. Yet this is where the test sharpens. Manipulators are skilled in the art of weaving emotional hooks. They may appeal to your empathy, reminding you of their wounds, making your boundary feel like cruelty. Or they may trigger your fear of abandonment, withdrawing affection until the ache feels unbearable. This is not random. It is a dance of the unconscious. Jung would call it the meeting of shadows, their unhealed wounds pulling at yours, their fear of loss igniting your own. And here lies the razor's edge of discernment, to feel their pain without making it your prison. Your task is not to harden into stone. It is to become clear water, reflecting reality without distortion. Emotional intelligence is often misunderstood as mere control over feelings, but in truth, it is the art of seeing the entire emotional landscape, yours and theirs, without losing yourself in it. When they cry, you can witness their tears without abandoning your truth. When they rage, you can hear the roar without silencing your boundary. This is not detachment, it is anchored compassion. Modern trauma psychology deepens this understanding. Many who fall into manipulative dynamics carry wounds of their own, often from childhood, where love and safety were intertwined with compliance. If you learned early that affection had to be earned by erasing parts of yourself, then the manipulator's dance feels familiar, even comforting. It is not weakness that draws you in. It is a longing to rewrite an old story. But the truth is, no relationship can heal a wound that requires your own recognition. The sovereign queen within is not born when another finally treats you right. She awakens the moment you decide to treat yourself as sacred. Boundaries, then, are not walls. They are declarations of self-respect. They are the language through which you teach others how to love you without consuming you. And here is the hidden power. Every time you hold a boundary, you rewire not just the relationship, but your own nervous system. You teach your body that safety does not come from compliance. It comes from alignment with your truth. Stoic wisdom whispers alongside this transformation. Seneca wrote that a calm mind is an impenetrable fortress, not because it resists attack, but because it refuses to be ruled by external storms. When you embody this, the manipulator's tactics lose their grip. They may thrash against your boundary, but the storm cannot sink a ship anchored in its own depths. You may begin to notice a strange shift inside you, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Fear, because reclaiming yourself feels like walking into unknown terror. Riddery, exhilaration, because for the first time in so long, you can hear your own voice without it being drowned in someone else's narrative. That voice is your compass. It has been whispering beneath the noise all along, waiting for you to listen. And yet the question still lingers. What happens if the manipulator refuses to honor your boundaries? Here, the sovereign queen faces her greatest trial, because sometimes the path of individuation demands not just holding a boundary but walking away entirely. This is where many falter, not because they are weak, but because the loss feels like death. In a way, it is. It is the death of the old self, the one who survived by bending, by shrinking, by trading authenticity for safety. But in that death, a new self rises, one who knows that love without respect is not love at all. As you stand at that crossroads, a profound clarity begins to dawn. The manipulator's power was never truly theirs. It was borrowed from the parts of you that had forgotten their strength. When you reclaim those parts, their hold crumbles like dust. And in that moment, the question becomes less about them and more about you. If you chose your truth over their approval, if you stepped fully into the queen within and claimed your life as your own, how would your world change? There is a moment, subtle yet seismic, when the woman who has been entangled in manipulation begins to see with new eyes. What once felt like love now carries the weight of a contract she never signed. Every word, every gesture, every silence begins to reveal its true shape, not affection freely given, but currency traded for compliance. This is the moment when awakening begins, and with it, a deep grief. Because to see clearly is to mourn the illusion you once called love. Carl Jung spoke of the anima and animus, the feminine and masculine aspects of the unconscious, and how, when unintegrated, they seek completion through projection. In manipulative dynamics, this often plays out as an unconscious hunger, the manipulator projecting their unhealed inner feminine or masculine onto the partner, demanding that she carry what they refuse to face. For the woman drawn into this pattern, her own unconscious may mirror it. Perhaps she seeks safety in the external masculine, a protector to heal old wounds. Perhaps she seeks validation through being chosen, even at the cost of her soul. This is not weakness. It is the psyche attempting to complete itself. But when two unhealed shadows meet, the dance becomes toxic. The sovereign queen within you knows this dance. She has seen it through centuries of myth and story, the maiden seeking rescue, the lover sacrificing herself to be worthy, the healer trying to fix the broken king. But the queen does not seek to be chosen, she chooses herself. She does not barter her essence for love. She embodies love so fully that only those aligned with truth can stand beside her. When you begin to awaken this archetype within, the pattern starts to fracture. Emotional manipulation thrives on unconsciousness. It relies on your automatic responses, the instinct to appease, to explain, to defend, to prove. Every time you are pulled into justification, the web tightens. But when you step back, when you observe instead of react, you shift the entire dynamic. Jung would call this moving from identification to awareness. Instead of being the role they assign you, the overly sensitive one, the ungrateful one, the problem, you become the witness. And the witness cannot be controlled. Yet awareness alone is not enough. The path forward requires a choice, one that feels both terrifying and liberating, to stop seeking permission to exist as you are. Because that is the core of every manipulative bond. It teaches you subtly that your worth must be negotiated. A boundary says otherwise. It says, my existence is not up for debate. This is why manipulators fear boundaries. They shatter the lie that love must be earned through self-erasure. Modern trauma research calls this reclamation of self reparenting. You become the mother and father to your own inner child, giving her what no one else could. You tell her, you are safe when you speak your truth. You are worthy even when someone withdraws love. You are whole, even if they walk away. Each boundary you set is not just protecting your present self. It is healing the child who learned long ago that love meant losing herself. And still, the test deepens, because the manipulator often senses this shift before you do. They may intensify their tactics, pulling every lever of guilt, fear, and longing. They may promise change, weaving words of remorse that feel like hope. Or they may grow colder, punishing you with indifference until you ache to return to the old pattern just to feel something again. This is the crucible where the queen is forged, not in the absence of pressure, but in the fire of it. The Stoics understood this intimately. Epictetus taught that the true me, sure of strength, is not in controlling others, but in mastering the self when others try to control you. When you hold your boundary not as a weapon, but as a quiet declaration of self-respect, you embody that mastery. You may tremble inside. Your voice may shake. But each time you refuse to abandon yourself, the foundation beneath you grows stronger. And with that strength comes a strange clarity. You begin to see the manipulator not as an all-powerful figure, but as a wounded soul trapped in their own unconscious patterns. This does not excuse their behavior, but it strips away the illusion of their dominance. You realize that their power over you was never inherent. It lived only in the places where you had forgotten your worth. From this vantage point, a profound question arises. What if this relationship, as painful as it is, was the catalyst for your awakening? What if the very dynamic that sought to erase you is the one that forces you to meet yourself fully for the first time? Jung believed that the shadow, when faced with courage, becomes the doorway to wholeness. Perhaps this is the hidden gift within the pain, not the relationship itself, but the self it calls you back to. The sovereign queen stands taller now within you. Her voice is steady, even when your heart aches. She knows that love without freedom is not love, that connection without respect is not connection. She does not harden into bitterness. She softens into truth. And in that truth, a new kind of power begins to hum beneath your skin, not the power to control, but the power to choose. And so, the question lingers, luminous and sharp. If you no longer sought love as proof of your worth, if you stood fully in your truth without fear of loss, what kind of love would you finally be free to receive? When a woman begins to live from her truth instead of her fear, the entire architecture of manipulation trembles. The dynamic depends on one thing above all else, that she doubts herself enough to hand over her power. The moment she stops seeking external validation as proof of her worth, the scaffolding of control begins to collapse. This is the quiet revolution, not marked by shouting or dramatic exits, but by the still, unshakable knowing. I am mine first. Carl Jung spoke of the self, the totality of who we are beyond ego, beyond roles, beyond the masks we wear to survive. In manipulative relationships, the ego becomes a battlefield. The manipulator's ego seeks to dominate, to control the narrative. Your ego seeks to preserve connection at all costs, even if it means betraying yourself. But the self waits underneath, untouched by their games, whispering through the cracks of your resistance. It does not bargain, it does not plead. It simply says, remember who you are. The sovereign queen is the voice of that self embodied. She is not born in the absence of pain, but in the crucible of it. Every time you choose truth over comfort, she grows stronger. Every time you hold a boundary, even when it shakes you, she stands taller. Her power does not come from dominating another, but from refusing to be dominated, not out of pride, but out of reverence for her own soul. And here lies a paradox many struggle to accept. You cannot change the manipulator. You cannot love them into health, heal them into honesty, or sacrifice yourself into saving them. This is perhaps the hardest truth to face, because beneath the pain there is often a deep longing that if you can just be enough, do enough, love enough, the dynamic will shift. But manipulation is not born from your lack. It is born from their refusal to face their own shadow. Until they choose to see themselves clearly, no amount of your giving can fill the void. Modern trauma psychology illuminates this further. Many manipulators operate from deeply wounded attachment systems. Control becomes their way to avoid abandonment. Dominance becomes their shield against vulnerability. In their own way, they are as terrified as you are, terrified of being seen, of being powerless, of being left. But compassion without boundaries is not love. It is self-erasure. To stay in a dynamic that demands you shrink to soothe their fear is not healing. It is reenacting their wound at the expense of your own wholeness. The sovereign queen knows this intimately. Her compassion is fierce but not foolish. She can see the wounded child behind the manipulator's mask, but she does not place her crown at their feet. She understands that the highest form of love is truth, and sometimes truth means walking away. This is not abandonment. It is liberation for both of you. Because the moment you refuse to participate in the dance, you offer them a mirror they cannot ignore. Whether they choose to face it is not yours to decide. Stoic philosophy offers a profound anchor here. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If you allow yourself to remain in an environment of distortion, over time you begin take on its shade. But when you guard your mind, when you choose clarity over chaos, you preserve the integrity of your being. This is why boundaries are not selfish. They are sacred. They are the walls that protect the temple of your soul from being painted with someone else's shadow. As you continue this journey, something begins to shift not just within you but around you. The manipulator's words no longer pierce as deeply. Their tactics no longer hook you as easily. You start to feel a widening space between their actions and your reactions. This space is freedom. It is the breath you didn't know you were holding. It is the first glimpse of life beyond the cage. And yet this freedom comes with its own challenge. Once you taste your power, the temptation is to wield it like a weapon, to fight, to expose, to tear down the one who hurt you. But the sovereign queen teaches a different lesson. True power does not need to destroy to prove itself. It simply stands unshaken. When you rise into this energy, the manipulator may rage, they may plead, they may collapse, but none of it can touch the core of you that has remembered her own worth. You may begin to feel an unfamiliar sensation in your chest, not the anxious flutter of walking on eggshells, but the steady rhythm of your own heartbeat. This is your center returning. This is your nervous system learning that safety is not found in controlling another's mood, but in trusting your own ground. Every breath you take from this place is a reclamation. And so the question deepens. pressing against the edges of your awareness. If you no longer allowed fear or guilt to dictate your choices, if you truly believed you were worthy of love that does not demand your erasure, what kind of life would you build from here? There comes a point where the woman no longer measures her worth by how softly she can walk on broken glass. The survival patterns that once felt like love begin to fall away, revealing the raw truth underneath. What you call devotion is often the quiet abandoning of yourself. This realization can feel like a wound, but in truth, it is the first breath of freedom. Because when you see the cost of self-betrayal, you can no longer pay it. Carl Jung often spoke of the shadow as the gatekeeper to wholeness. In manipulative dynamics, both shadows are at play. The manipulator hides their fear of powerlessness beneath control, while the woman hides her fear of rejection beneath compliance. When these shadows meet, they create a bond forged not in love but in unconscious contracts. To break free is not just to escape another's grip, but to turn inward and face the part of you that agreed to the dance. This is not blame, it is liberation. Because when you claim your role, you claim your power to end it. The sovereign queen within you does not flinch at this truth. She knows that self-awareness is the sharpest blade you can wield. She is not interested in blame or vengeance. She is interested in sovereignty. And sovereignty begins where excuses end. Every time you say, "This is what I allowed and this is what I will no longer allow," the chains weaken. Every time you choose your truth over their approval, the walls of the cage begin to crack. Modern trauma wisdom calls this moving from survival to authenticity. For years, perhaps decades, you may have believed that safety came from making yourself small, agreeable, easy to love. But safety bought at the price of your soul is not safety at all. It is imprisonment dressed as care. When you begin to live authentically, you discover a different kind of security, one that does not depend on another's mood, but on the unshakable ground of your own worth. The manipulator often senses this shift before you fully do. Their reactions may become unpredictable, a storm of tenderness and cruelty, affection and withdrawal. This is not proof of love, it is proof of panic, because your awakening threatens the very structure their control depends on. In their eyes, your boundary is not just a line, it is a mirror reflecting their own emptiness back at them. And most people will do anything to avoid that reflection. Here is where the Stoic teaching becomes a lifeline. You cannot control their choices, only your own. The moment you stop trying to manage their reaction, you reclaim the energy you have been bleeding into the dynamic. You realize that peace does not come from appeasing chaos. It comes from refusing to let chaos live inside you. This inner calm is not passivity. It is rebellion at its most sacred. And then something extraordinary begins to happen. The manipulator's power fades not because they changed, but because you did. What once pierced now barely grazes. What once felt like truth now reveals itself as projection. You begin to see the dynamic for what it is, not a reflection of your worth, but a reflection of their wounds. And with that sight comes a choice that may feel like stepping off a cliff, but is in reality, stepping onto solid ground for the first time. The sovereign queen stands at this threshold, her crown not a symbol of dominance but of self-belonging. She does not roar her power, she embodies it. In her presence, manipulation has no foothold, because she no longer seeks to be chosen. She chooses herself again and again until the old patterns dissolve into dust. But here lies the question that will shape everything that follows. When the old dynamic crumbles, what will you build in its place? Freedom can feel disorienting when you have spent years navigating control. Love without chains can feel foreign when you have only known affection as a transaction. The path ahead is not just about leaving what harms you. It is about learning to receive what heals you. Jung would say this is the true work of individuation, not simply breaking patterns, but integrating what you have learned into a life that reflects your wholeness. It is allowing the queen within to guide you, not just away from what drains you, but toward what nourishes you. It is stepping into relationships, romantic, familial, and even with yourself, that honor the fullness of who you are without demanding your erasure. And so, as you stand here, one question pulses through the air like a heartbeat. If you built a life, a love, a self not from fear or survival, but from the deep knowing of your own worth, what would it look like? There is a profound stillness when the old patterns finally fall silent. For the first time in perhaps years, there is no scrambling to anticipate another's moods, no bending yourself to keep peace that was never real, no bargaining your soul for scraps of validation. What remains is raw and unadorned. You, without the weight of someone else's story draped across your shoulders. At first, this can feel like emptiness, but it is not. It is space. Space for truth. Space for love that does not demand you disappear to receive it. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as a return to the self, the integration of all that you are. In breaking free from manipulation, you are not just leaving a relationship dynamic, you are calling back the exiled parts of yourself. The voice you silenced to keep the peace. The intuition you ignored to avoid conflict. The dreams you set aside to maintain connection. One by one, they return, not as echoes of who you were, but as living parts of who you are becoming. This is not just healing, this is resurrection. The sovereign queen now stands fully awake within you. She is no longer a whisper or a flicker in the dark. She is the steady pulse of your own power, the quiet authority of a woman who has walked through fire and come out carrying her own soul. Her boundaries are no longer acts of defense. They are acts of devotion, to the self, to truth, to love in its purest form. She knows that to let someone close is not to surrender your crown, but to invite them into a kingdom built on authenticity. Modern trauma wisdom calls this stage post-traumatic growth. It is the place where pain becomes wisdom, where wounds become maps. You begin to see that every red flag you ignored, every moment you doubted yourself, every tear shed in confusion was not wasted. It was shaping you into someone who can see clearly now, someone who will never again confuse control for love. And in that clarity lies the gift. You are no longer afraid to lose what demands your self-betrayal to survive. The Stoics understood this freedom. Epictetus wrote that the true measure of a person is how they meet what they cannot control. In choosing your truth over their approval, you have done exactly that. You could not control their manipulation. You could not make them see. But you chose to see yourself. You chose to meet their storm with the calm authority of a woman who belongs to herself. That is power no one can take. And now, a new question emerges, not born of fear, but of possibility. What will you do with this freedom? Because healing is not just about leaving what broke you. It is about building what will nourish you. It is about crafting relationships that honor the truth you fought to reclaim. It is about loving yourself so deeply that you will never again settle for love that asks you to vanish. The Sovereign Queen guides you here too. She reminds you that discernment is not just a shield, it is a compass. The same clarity that freed you will now lead you. You will see with new eyes the people who meet your boundaries with respect instead of fear. You will feel the difference between affection given freely and affection traded for compliance. And most importantly, you will no longer mistake intensity for intimacy. Love that is real is not a whirlwind. It is a steady flame, one that grows brighter when both souls stand in their full truth. And so, as this journey closes, a soft but powerful call remains. Share the moment you finally said enough and reclaimed your power in the comments below. Speak it into the world not as a story of pain, but as a testament to your strength. Because every time a woman claims her truth, she lights the path for another still trapped in the fog. Remember this above all else. The woman who sees the truth chooses her peace, and in choosing her peace, she chooses herself. Always.